Hello, I'm Leonard Maltin, and I'm delighted to be sitting here today with the man who gives life and voice to Goofy, Bill Farmer. Thanks for coming.
Gorge, it's my pleasure.
One doesn't set out in life, I suppose, to become the voice of Goofy. So tell us a little about what your career ambitions were and what led you to this wonderful job.
Well, ever since I was a little kid, I was enamored with cartoons and the movies. I grew up in a small town in Kansas, and so there wasn't a whole lot to do. So Saturday morning, it was cartoon time. And I found that I had a little facility for doing the voices. I just really loved them. And of all the cartoon characters, Goofy was my favorite. And I remember watching The Wonderful World of Color with my dad sitting on his lap, never thinking I'd ever get a chance to do that. But it's kind of like a dream come true.
Tell us a little about how you started out your career. What did you hope to be, and what were your first jobs?
My first job, when I was about 15, 16, I found out I had an affinity for doing impressions. And I'd, of course, watch, in those days, Westerns were big, and I'd do a John Wayne or Jimmy Stewart. Well, Walter Brennan, some voices like that. Or Pat Buttram, who was one of my favorites. And I would drive through with my friends through places, a burger place, and I'd order, I'd like a big cheeseburger and a large Coke to go. And they'd look out at me, and my friends would laugh. So I got put up in front of everybody, do your John Wayne, do your Jimmy Stewart. And I found out, hey, this is kind of cool. And so when I went to college, I got into radio and television, and kicked around in radio for a number of years, then got into stand-up comedy for about 5 years as an impressionist. Finally coming out to Hollywood in about 1986 and striking it the big time with the Goof.
So did you work comedy clubs?
Oh, yes, yes. I started out in Dallas at a place called the Comedy Corner. And the way I got there, Tuesday night was an open mic night. Anyone could go up. And at the time, I had a job at an electronics company. And I'd gotten out of show business, out of radio, and missed the audience. And so I went down on this Tuesday night and signed up to go up, and I wrote a little 5-minute comedy routine, and I got a pretty good response. And I can tell you the date, March 16th of 1982. After that date, I went every week to the Comedy Corner and trying to work up routine. Found out what didn't work, what did work, how to present a joke, and it became a career within about 6 months. And I did that from 1982 until I moved to California in 1986.
How'd you decide to make the move to Los Angeles? I mean, that's the goal of an awful lot of people who want to make it in show business.
My agent in Dallas, I had a commercial agent, and she said, with all of the voices you do, why don't you go out and give it a couple of years in Hollywood to see what happens? And I'd just gotten married recently, about a year before that, and we talked about it. And so I left Jennifer in Dallas. Well, I got an apartment out here and commuted for about a year. But about 4 months after moving out here, my agent said, do you do any of the Disney characters? Because at that time there were several voices for the characters, and Mr. Eisner wanted to always hear the same voice, and as close a match to the original Pinto Colvig as they could find. And out of several hundred people, I guess, that tried out, they liked mine. And it was my very first animated character audition.
That's luck and fate, I guess, combined.
I couldn't have done better, and I'm so glad because it's been about 16 years of doing the Goof now.
Wow. Wow. Now, obviously, you'd grown up watching those cartoons, so you knew the voice, and voices were your specialty. But when you knew you were going to do the audition, did you study up especially?
Yeah, I got a lot of the old ones, boat builders and clock cleaners, and the 1930s Goofy is where my ear comes into it. And ever since I was a kid, I'd practiced the laugh, and gosh, it came naturally.
What was it that you think clinched the job for you?
The laugh.
Mm-hmm.
The laugh. And gorsh, you know. Gorsh. You got those two. That's a lot of it.
That's wonderful. Do you know for a fact that it was the boss who had to say yes or no?
I've heard that. I heard that they went through all of the top brass and that they all seemed to like my Goofy, and I'm real happy they did.
That's great. Now, you came to this job at around the same time that Tony Anselmo inherited Donald Duck,
Yes.
and Wayne and Rusey inherited Mickey and Minnie. And the four of you have kind of become the, well, literally the spokespeople, but also kind of the flag bearers, I think, for those characters.
Wayne puts it best when he says that we're just carrying the torch for a little while.
Mm-hmm.
We're glad to do it.
Do you enjoy working with other characters, too?
Oh, I love it. When Wayne and Rusey and Tony and I get together, which we don't unfortunately get to do ensemble work too much because I think we crack up too much. Rusey's usually just on the floor rolling around laughing because we just start cracking jokes and they have to separate us. But, oh, it's a joy. It's a lot of fun.
How would you describe Pinto Colvig's approach to Goofy? Now, he created the character. It was his voice that inspired the character. What made that performance special, you think?
I think the innocence and the optimism are the two qualities that Goofy has, because he's ever an optimist. He'll fall off of a mountain, he'll get right back up and do it again, not think anything about it. And his genuine good-heartedness. He's genuinely a nice guy, and I think most people can relate to those qualities.
The cartoons that you remember best, that I remember best for Goofy, those early ones, are there a couple you can name? Because on this disc we're going to be seeing all of them. If you had to name the cartoons that were like the quintessential Goofy cartoons, which ones would first come to mind?
The first one's Goofy and Wilbur, because that was his first starring solo role. And that's definitely a classic goof. Lonesome Ghosts is one of my favorites. That has a lot of great classic Goofy in it. And I would say The Art of Skiing, much later, and he doesn't do much talking in it, but the how-to series with Goofy in it are also some of the best Goofies.
Now, when they did those how-to cartoons, they're so funny. They're some of my favorites. But as you say, the voice was de-emphasized in those. The one thing that wasn't missing ever was that...
Oh, the Goofy yell.
Now, that Goofy yell that we all know and love is such a unique sound. Do you know how it came about?
Well, actually, it's from The Art of Skiing, and I think that was done in 1947. And the actual yell was done by a yodeler that they had to do some yodeling in that cartoon. His name was Hans Schroll. Hans Schroll, I think. The Goofy yell.
And you're called upon to do that with some regularity.
Quite often.
Mm-hmm. It's a specialty, and it's not a growth industry, but it's yours.
No, but it's my little niche in the industry. So if you need the yell, give me a call.
Now, Pinto Colvig came from a circus background and a carnival background, and that was his connection, I think, with people. He understood sort of grassroots comedy, what people responded to. Do you think the fact that you performed for audiences as long as you did gave you or gives you a grounding when you play comedy?
I think stand-up comedy is the best training ground there is, because there's no such thing as pity laughter. You are either funny or you aren't, and the crowd will not, well, let's laugh for him because he's trying hard. No, you learn comedy, and it's the hard way to learn it. You learn it by recording yourself, listening. Well, that didn't work. Yeah, oh, that worked. I'll keep that in the act. And by doing it, that you learn how to relate to an audience, you learn what's funny, and you learn timing, and the acting that this is all about.
Now, some people mistakenly think that what cartoon voices is all about is a funny voice. But it's acting, isn't it? Talk a little about that, if you would.
When I first came out here, I took some classes from a great voice artist, Dawes Butler, who was the voice behind all of the Hanna-Barbera classics, Yogi Bear and Huckleberry Hound and dozens of other ones. And he was the one that put it in our minds first that it's acting. You're not a guy doing funny voices, you are an actor. And you're acting, so the acting leads the character, if that makes sense. The acting is premier.
So to portray Goofy, you have to understand Goofy then, don't you?
Oh, you have to understand him very well. You have to be goofy. You have to think goofy. You have to know where he's coming from. And that's a mistake with a lot of people doing Goofy's voice. They just make him sound like a hick or dumb, and I never look at him that way. I look at him as simple, yet honest, and a good soul, and that's what comes through first.
Those are the qualities I thought they caught so well in a Goofy movie. I'm a great fan of that film, and I think it's such a sweet film, and I love the relationship between him and his son, and the way they set it up and turn Goofy, who is, in some ways you might say, an old-fashioned character, into a contemporary character that still made sense.
Everybody thinks their dad's goofy once in a while. Yeah, it was a lot of fun to add the new layers to Goofy that we've never shown before. The nurturing father, the caring, the loving side of Goofy. And even in an extremely goofy movie, he has a girlfriend, and so he can be a romantic as well. So, a lot of new things we got to show.
That's wonderful. Now, we should explain that you don't just do the voice of Goofy for television episodes or movies.
Oh, no.
Tell us some of the variety of ways and means you perform that voice.
Goodness, since 1986, I've done probably close to 3,000 different projects for Disney.
3,000?
3,000, about 20-some albums. I've done talking watches, talking lamps, talking telephones, talking jalopy cars, and cartoons, movies, educational shows, industrials, commercials, about every venue that there is, Goofy is performed in.
And if we go to one of the Disney theme parks and we hear Goofy, that's you, isn't it?
It's a live stage show, it's me.
Tell me about the reaction of children when they learn that you're Goofy.
There are two general reactions. First of all, if it's one of my friends introducing me to a child and saying, "This is Bill Farmer, he does the voice of Goofy," they look at me very strangely because they're hearing the voice come out of this man. Mm-hmm. And so they're usually frightened and run away. I get quite often asked to speak to children in hospital through like Make-A-Wish Foundation and famous phone friends. And that is where the magic comes alive, because on the phone, they only hear my voice, and to them it is so real. And we get so many letters coming back later on how excited these children are to get a chance to talk to Goofy. So when I'm on the phone with the kids is when it really comes alive.
I don't imagine there are words to describe that kind of satisfaction.
There aren't any.
Plus, you bring happiness to people of all ages, kids and grown-ups alike. Your character has no dark side.
No.
Goofy is probably one of the sunniest, happiest, most upbeat, optimistic characters in all of cartoondom, and you get to be that character.
I'm very lucky to get to hang around with him for a while.
Thanks so much for being here, Bill.
My pleasure.
Thank you.